Lunch. Sure is nice to see Annie Avery jump here in the front row for us, Sailboat Broker of the Year, twice running and all that.
We got two Brokers of the Year right up there on the stage with you.
My good friend and a fellow Emily Dickinson fan. So Paul, I don't know where you came up with this one, but be the best that you can be, okay? It's got to be from the Army, right? That's be all you can be. Is
Mike McCarthy was my inspiration.
You swiped that, okay. So with the suggestion that if you join the Army, they're going to make the best out of you, they're going to take you to your zenith, and they're going to take all your talents and to the nth degree.
Get you shot.
So perhaps not to the magnitude that the Army might accomplish, but that's why we've assembled this panel of individuals here who have been to boot camp, have been to the battlefront, they've earned their battle stripes, they've earned their battle ribbons, and they've got a couple of yachting Purple Hearts along the way, I'm sure, as well. So to introduce my fellow panelists, Wes Sanford is a guy, and you'll read in your notes there, but I'll summarize it for you. Dedicated to his clients in achieving their yachting aspirations with the discipline of a pedigreed business professional. How's that? Who coined that one?
My wife, she's a writer.
He's a practitioner of the arts. He worked on yachts as well for 12 years. He brags about being a very successful charter captain as well. When he shifted gears, he came ashore at Northrop & Johnson. Pleased to acknowledge his accomplishments at Northrop & Johnson. He's always talked about around town in very favorable terms. Mike McCarthy is a fellow colleague of mine who celebrated his 15th year at HMY. Is that right, Mike?
Well, 16 now. It's state.
16, yep. And winner of the coveted HMY President's Award 12 times. 12 times, not bad. And I might say the 2019 Broker of the Year for IYBA. For yachts 30 feet and less. Meters.
They call me Outboard Mike.
Okay. All right. Should be mentioned as well that Mike is also a 15-year veteran of Wall Street, right? Yep. We'd like to hear a little bit about that later. And then we have Lon McCloskey, a good old friend of mine, successful business owner at the Marine Group before selling his company, former board member of IYBA. I don't know whether you were president or not. IYBA, president of IYBA. His one accomplishment he tried to achieve, he never got, and that was a crawfish boil for the annual party, but we never got him that. And he now enjoys a prominent position with Fraser Yachts, and these are the role models. Everybody has a role model. We've got 3 of them up here, especially you young folks that are trying to figure out your way into the business, and especially if in this lucrative market, you're not making it. You might want to listen to what some of the wisdom that's conveyed here from these guys. So I've broken this down into 3 sections, this be the best that you can be thing. And we're going to talk about business practices, best business practices. We're also going to talk about ethics because we've been asked to talk about ethics. And then the 3rd section is going to be Q&A. Now, I want to warn you that I like a lot of back and forth between the attendees, which is a warning, don't fall asleep, because if I ask you a question, you say, I'm sorry, I missed that, I know you're sleeping. So we may go back and forth, and if at any time you have an idea or thought, a suggestion, or you want to react to something that one of the panelists said, just raise your hand. Paul will be right there with the microphone. We'll come around and get your opinion on something. So let's start with, I think the best thing to do is to start with business practices. And so Inc. magazine, I looked it up, and it kind of works for us really perfectly here. Discovering and utilizing the optimal ways of operating in order to reach your business potential while behaving in an ethical manner. That kind of covers this whole thing for us. So we'll get to the ethics part, but right now I want to talk about business practices. So I want to ask each of my panelists, or some of you as a matter of fact, as to how exactly, what do you define as success? And I won't begin to throw any, is it money, is it this, is it that, but Mike McCarthy, what do you define as your personal success?
You know, obviously the ability to support my family. I have 2 young children, and we, between private school and we live up north in the summer, and we have boats and bills like everybody else does, and being able to have them in a comfortable lifestyle and pay the bills and save for a rainy day. I mean, I left Wall Street and came into this market in the mid-2000s and had one great year, and then the next year the recession hit. Mm-hmm. So, you know, you got to save for a rainy day, and you know, having a nest egg, I think, is utterly important because that gives you the confidence, you know, to continue to sell boats at a high level. I mean, the thing I noticed with a lot of my coworkers in circa 2007 and 2008 when you walk by their office, you can hear fear in their voice. And ultra high net worth people smell it.
Yeah.
They smell it because they don't, if they have 200, 500, 1,000 employees, they don't have time to spend talking to individuals because they would have no time to conduct business, but they can just instinctually smell weakness and fear on somebody, and they'll just shy away from it. They want somebody who's, has a reasonable degree of confidence and capability.
Yeah, shark getting a scent of that blood. And it's kind of like you define it in terms of needs. Okay, and I often talk about the difference between wants and needs. Needs is the much stronger statement to be made. I want to lose 10 pounds. I need to lose 10 pounds. It's a stronger statement. So necessity being the mother of invention, that's where you're coming from with your success. Wes?
Wow. We're all going to define success a little bit differently.
Absolutely.
A little bit personally. And it changes over time. So for me, when I started 16 years ago, success was surviving the first year, right? Getting the first deal, then getting the first deal that was big enough to sustain you into the next year. And then eventually, like normal people, you start setting the bar a little bit higher. It was, could I make a couple $100,000 a year? Could I make even more than that? And the interesting thing is somewhere around after year 10, once you get to the point where you feel like, okay, this isn't going to be one of those things where the rug's going to get pulled out from under you, you start changing your goals towards more oriented towards the outcome for the client, right? And that's really probably the part where I think success takes on its own momentum, right? When you get to the point where you can say, the client's outcome is more important than whether or not I get that deal done, then you'll find that it becomes self-replicating, people are attracted to that, and it becomes self-fulfilling.
I think good sales managers will often say, don't focus on the money, how much it's going to be and all that, because you kind of psychologically begin to spend it, and if the deal doesn't happen, there's greater disappointment. But the idea is to put a deal together to the satisfaction of the client, and that's a good that you've defined it that way. Lon?
Bob, this is year 40 for me, so.
Me too, pal.
I sold a lot of small boats in my day that have morphed into, more boats. So success is defined differently. I'm still selling boats to people I knew 40 years ago. Yeah. So whether it's their kids or grandkids, to that matter. So success, again, has its personal touches and its business touches. Got to the point where I owned a business and was successful with people and employees, and now I'm back to not owning a business and just working hard. So I find that I'm still happy, and that's a big point. When you look at all the things you do in life, if you're happy about what you still do 40 years later, I can say that's success.
I agree with that. Now, if I were to go around the room and ask everybody, you'd all would come up with a different definition of what your success is. But I'm going to try to nail Paul Flannery back here. He's wandering around, got nothing else to do. Paul, what's your definition of success?
Aston Martin DB9.
Okay, so you're materially.
Is the executive committee listening?
Paul.
So.
Seriously, much like has been echoed by the rest of the panel, success changes. And like Wes said, when we first started, am I going to be able to get another deal done before my money runs out? Am I going to be able to pay my mortgage? Success is being able to pay your bills. And then what was interesting is after a few years in the business, you struggle through the highs and the lows of a year. And on December 31st, what I would find myself doing was looking back and saying, that was worth it. Yeah. That was worth it. The effort that I put in, the trials and the tribulations, it was worth it. And you reset to zero on January 1 and start it all over again. But you develop a confidence after a while that it's going to be okay. And that's the most difficult thing about a commission sales position, is that at first you never know what's going to happen until you develop a track record and you start to develop some confidences. And like Mike said, your clients can smell confidence. Early in the game, I had a guy come up to me one day and he said, Paul, you look desperate. You need to change that because nobody's going to buy anything.
Like Mike said.
Desperate.
Right.
Yeah, like Mike said.
That's good. So each of you, I'm going to ask you, what juices you? What motivates you to go there every day and turn your computer on and all that? What gets you revved up for the day? Wes?
Probably in its simplest form for me, it has more to do. if you enjoy what you're doing, and assuming you're successful at it, being a student of that industry, being a student of that profession is one of those things where you can kind of dive into some of the deeper stuff. You can enjoy what your clients are doing, whether they're on the buying or the selling side. You end up in a spot where the fulfillment is not necessarily just making the money, which the rewards are going to be there if you work hard enough. It's enjoying seeing or going with your clients on a boat. It's seeing them take their first trip and sending you pictures of that stuff. And at some point, if that isn't enough and you're always chasing the next deal for that commission, you will burn out, right? That's
great advice.
I can't stress enough that the motivation for going to work every day is important, right? If you want to do it for the long haul. There's people that are willing to chase a commission on any individual year, and that might be enough for them. But if you want to do it over the long haul, you need to find something a little bit deeper. So,
Lon?
Well, first of all, trying to get my inbox clear every morning.
delete.
Look. Yeah. But I think that one of the biggest things is when new people come into the business. Yeah. And it's very important to have those new people come in when they're buying or selling, or more the buyers, but introducing them through the process of buying a boat, and it's a lifestyle. It's not just buying that asset. It's a lifestyle change for them, and having them understand that, and then walking them through the process, and then hopefully you do such a good job with that they refer your friends and family members to you after the sale is complete. So that's a big key. We work so hard for the new business, and it's tough. It's the toughest to get. You should be living on repeats and referrals at 40 years of doing this. But the new business is the hardest to get, and it's an accomplishment if you do get that new business and then do it the right way.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you guys, all of you, a little bit later about how to sustain client loyalty, but those are really good points. We have the materialism, as Paul Flannery with his Aston Martin, and we have necessity, the financial necessities or needs of my family, the client satisfaction, and your personal satisfaction. So you see, everybody has this different kind of an idea about it, but you've got to define what your success is before you're going to be able to plot the track toward that and map it out for yourself. So what happens from the moment that you get a listing on a yacht? What do you do from that very moment, and what process do you go through to make sure that it is being handled properly? Wes?
Every deal's a little bit different. I tend to dive into the people that are involved in the deal. So if it's on the listing side and you're trying to get a handle on the boat, it's actually spending time on the boat, spending time with the crew, spending time with the seller, right? Understanding the dynamics of not only the hardware, but the people involved are kind of what I use to set up the building blocks to get to the end, to where you end up with a successful deal, rather than just spinning your wheels constantly on a daily basis. Just if your thought process is wait for the phone to ring, answer the phone, answer the questions, you're missing more than 90% of the process.
Take that to heart. Yep.
You need to be prepared and thinking ahead of what are the possible things that could happen along the way. And that's true whether you're representing a buyer or whether you're representing a seller. So I would say a lot of advanced preparation even before the phone starts ringing, and then thinking of ways that you can kind of either get around or solve problems well in advance of it. It's going to serve you well. So it's a lot of advanced prep.
Mike, you just got the listing. It's a 200-foot rust bucket. What do you do? What are you going to do with it?
I'd hand that off.
That's the name of the...
No, so I mean, if the owner says, yeah, 1,000-hour service has been conducted, or we had an image scan, or any scopes of work they'll detail out, and you ultimately write up on your listing, get evidence of it. I mean, physically get the printout from the 1,000-hour service from the MTU or man mechanic or whoever it is, and catalog it all. And a lot of times I have some excellent captains running some bigger boats, but all their paperwork is just thrown in a box somewhere in a wheelhouse. Just, I know it sounds crazy, but I put it in binders sometimes, because I get to see what's physically there. And then B, when a prospective buyer or another broker comes through, they can whip through it and with some confidence know that you're selling them, you're not selling a bill of goods, you're selling them it's legitimately been done.
Yeah. So this self-education process to have all the answers.
Yeah, it takes a lot of guesswork out of it because, if you're dealing with 4, 5, 10, 20, $30 million boats, a broker, how many shots do you get with that buyer? If you bring him to survey and he spends 20, 30 grand on a survey and it's just not what you proposed it to be, you're probably not going to get that guy back.
You lose credibility, yeah.
It's going to go away. So you try to make it good on all ends. Mm-hmm. And you're serving your client well by doing that as well. You're just presenting the boat in a proper way.
Mm-hmm. How about you, Lon?
I think you need to be the author of the boat when you represent it. So you need to know that boat as well. You need to know its history, when it was born, if you will, and how many owners it's had, because you're going to get bombarded with those questions. And I also think that in the sales process, we've adjusted our commission agreements between houses to, in a lot of cases, be 50-50, 60-40. So you need to work with that agent that's calling you. If you're in a 50, he's your equal partner, so to speak, in trying to bring home a commission. So the more information you can share with him about that boat he's calling on, the better. And he can share your same commentary. So that getting the listing and being able to be forthright about that information is important. And it happens quickly. You may get a phone call today, the phone's ringing, and the information's got to come that fast.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you've heard me say this before. I love to tell the story what Andrew Silla said the old way. There are 3 things and 3 things only. I know you've heard this before. I'm going to say it anyway. There are 3 things and 3 things only you say to a client. One is yes. Second is I don't know, but I'll find out. And the third is, isn't she beautiful? So he said that always worked for him. I think things have changed since then, but he's...
that's why he's in Newport and we're here.
That's why he's retired on his own boat. So anybody have any questions so far? Any clarifications? Any thoughts, ideas? Just raise your hand and shout it out, and Paul gets you the mic. Marketing has changed dramatically for us over the past few years, and it continues to pick up momentum and changing in the digital space that we live in, with new millennial buyers who have a different attitude about luxury goods, social networking and such. How is it that, can you tell me how it is that you personally are able to separate yourself from the pack by marketing yourself? What do you go through? What do you involve yourself in order to be able to say, here's who I am and here's the rest of everybody else? Maintain prominence.
Right. In my particular case, I've always accentuated photography and video for listings, if that's what we're going to talk about. And I'm involved with a company that feels that that's a high priority as well. It wasn't that long ago that I think brokers in general used to go through boats with some kind of a little digital camera and take pictures and upload it, and maybe even there's some people here that used to fax those to people. But today, as fast as everything's changing, if you are not doing high resolution video of your listings, you will be at the bottom of the pile, right? It's not even about photography anymore. I mean, photography is still important, but that part of the business has changed so fast. That's one thing that if you work by yourself as an independent broker, or you're working with an organization, if you're not talking about that and accentuating that, you're going to be behind, because that's how everybody's learning about boats these days.
Just remember when print brochures were the chief marketing tool, the chief selling tool. Where are they now? So, Lon, same question.
The social media part kind of takes care of itself within our group, so we're constantly trying to improve that. I go back to the old school. I like to talk on the phone.
Yeah.
So if I can grab somebody, you lose some personality with text.
Yeah.
And you lose the context. But when you do talk to somebody on the phone, they can either hear your enthusiasm or you can hear theirs.
Yeah.
And I think that's a connection you can make. So that's one of the things I like to do.
Texting can be a little dangerous. You may be saying something that you don't want to say.
Or you slip.
But you've had a couple of cocktails and all of you hit the send and you go, oh my God. Mike?
Well, I mean, with me personally, I do a lot of work within the Princess product group, and like Facebook and Instagram were helpful for me because as I sell them, I post them out. So as time went on, people would ask me to call, find out what other princesses I had coming to market, and more importantly, comp boats. So I knew about boats that are upstream before anybody else knew them because I was help comping them. So it was just kind of a self-feeding animal, and it worked out real well.
That's great. How many of you use LinkedIn as a social media device? Oh, not that many. Half the room. You might be interested to know that LinkedIn is the #1 employment agency in the world now. And if you're not on LinkedIn and networking within, you can't believe the number of inquiries that I get on LinkedIn for consulting services. It's quite the tool, and you should visit that. I want to talk to you about your customers. And you talked about keeping customers for a long time and all that. What is it you do to be able to maintain the loyalty of your clients? How is it you're able to keep them within when there's so many others that want them?
Provide the full service.
Yeah.
And from A to Z. And I think that one call does it all.
I think that's a good point about picking up the phone and calling instead of depending on email
Staying in
and
touch.
text. Yeah.
It's hard to do because of everything else that's going on, but I've never been good about a tickler file. But if you had a tickler file, when you sell that boat, you make sure 3 months, 4 months, whatever it is, you stay in touch and find out what's going on with the boat, and if I can help you with service or these contacts. You know, the old days you used to get discounts at boat yards for bringing your clients in, but the same thing is, hey, this is a good boat yard. They've got a great reputation. Why don't you try them if you're unhappy with your current one? So I think
concierge, basically.
Yeah, I think it's the
You
one
just take
call
the
does it
call.
all.
Yeah, I know that sometimes brokers will slide over into the management spectrum and start doing things for owners. I think that's good to a certain extent. Find them the yard and do this, but I always warn them, when things don't work out, then you're going to be the guys to blame. You may be putting a big commission at stake for the fact that you're just helping this guy find a captain, or you're helping him find, call Bob. You see, he's called Bob. So, Mike?
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right about that, because referring boat yards and mechanics and captains is a thankless job. If you do unbelievable, you'll never say thank you. And if the guy turns out to be a clown, then it's on you.
Yeah.
So we get forced in that position all the time. I mean, my wife knows that if my phone rings after 9 o'clock, usually it has to do with a crew issue, which either an owner bitching about a captain or vice versa. And you gotta, you're kind of like a shrink. I mean, I got one guy right now, he's been on the hook for 27 days in the Bahamas, a captain. The owner's a fly in, fly out, he's got his own jet. And he's trying to keep the crew sanity aboard the boat. And he just calls me every night.
You must be talking to the same guy I'm talking to. I was just telling somebody a little earlier that I'm helping this owner of this yacht. This is one of those, other than that, Mrs. Lincoln, how was the play stories? And they're on charter. Crew, there's such a critical shortage of crew right now that the industry is in a lot of trouble because they're picking up crew that aren't working, and the reason that they're not working is because they shouldn't be working. So this stewardess was serving up a lobster last night and didn't tell anybody that she was allergic to shellfish. So she touched on her skin and she went into an anaphylactic shock, started going into tremors on the floor, and there's the charter guest all looking at her. Would you believe the charter guests, 3 of them were doctors with their wives, right? So they treated her, but it's like the crew situation is unbelievable out there right now. I don't know how the industry is going to respond to it, but we really do need to organize a response to the lack of good qualified crew.
Well, I think there should be some training program for new owners.
Owners training, we used to call it OTS.
Right?
Owners training school.
Congratulations, you just bought a 100-foot yacht. These are how you treat your people.
Yeah.
Do you know what's going on downstairs? I mean, you people are on deck from 4 a.m. to 3 o'clock in the morning getting hammered. You got to have coffee ready. You got to flip the heads in beds. I mean, there's a whole, but they don't want to know about the details. And I'm like, they're human beings.
Isn't that what below decks is for?
Oh. Yeah, but the boats, I'm not reeling, 12 people cruise. I'm dealing 4 or 5 people cruise, and that's brutal.
Oh yeah, it's tough.
But yet the level of expectation of the service is the same on a 4-man, 5-man boat.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Ed Sachs used to say, yachting is the euphoria of acquisition and the devastation of ownership. And that's unfortunately the OTS thing. Owners usually, it takes them a captain or two until they get the reality of what this is all about. It's not corporate America. It's not like running their factory that's making Frisbees. But in fact, it's a different world altogether.
Well, they're provisioning the boat last minute for a quick turnaround. And they're wondering why the lettuce they got in NASA isn't quite as crunchy as the one in Manhattan.
Yeah.
It's like they don't downstep.
Yeah.
Based on where they are or what the circumstances are. It's just it's the same. And you know, that's part of our job, is kind of spending time with them and gently easing them into it. But it's
lowering the expectations.
yeah, exactly.
When an entry-level boat is 100+ feet, you know, they didn't go through the steps of learning.
Exactly. Yeah, they didn't come up in a.
And that's true for crew, by the way, as well. A lot of times.
So I was asking you about maintaining customer loyalty,
Okay.
and your long-term relationships.
In its simplest form, maintaining customer loyalty in my world is don't give them a reason to go to anybody else, right? They're looking for an expert, they're looking for a resource, and they're looking for an honest broker, right? And I mean by honest broker, not an honest broker, but just an honest broker of information. So you need to be a student of what you do. And I've said that before, but you need to understand a little bit about engineering. For me, I worked in finance before this, so I have a kind of a way to relate to customers. I ran boats for 12 years, so I can relate to the crew. And then beyond that, it's just learning enough about it that there's really no reason for them to go anywhere else, right? You have all of the information they need. Never ever be dishonest with them. That's one thing that can get you fired. And don't be afraid to say, I don't know.
Yeah, Bill Whittemore, a guy I used to work for, Andy might remember that name. I don't think anybody else in the room remembers that name. The first day I went to work for him, I said, well, what do I do? He says, you sit over there and you answer the phone. I said, well, I don't know anything about yachts. He said, that's exactly what I'm looking for. Just answer the phone. And I said, well, that's it. And he said, yeah, I'm going to Newport. I'll see you next summer. So, but he said one thing. He said, Bob, he says, you're going to, because I started out in the yacht management business. He said, Bob, you're going to be in the yacht management business. He said, you're going to see all kinds of ways that you can steal money from your clients, overcharge at the yard, do this, do that. He says, the very first time you do it, you're going to be like a lot of other guys in this business that hit the zenith and then they crash. He said, so stay honest, be honest with them all times, even if you're delivering bad news, straight up and honest with them all the time. So that's a good bit of advice there. Lastly, on this particular subject, before we get into ethics, we're running a little short right now. What is the corporate culture at your respective companies that exists for you that allows you to flourish? Okay, so within your group, what kind of an environment do they provide for you to be able to allow you to, anybody else that works there as well, if they take advantage of the resources? Mike, we'll start with you. You said it was a pirate ship earlier.
Well, yeah, I mean, destructured is what I mean by pirate ship.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a free-range chicken.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't really need or like to be managed. That's just because I ran my own shop on Wall Street, and I just kind of don't like being yelled at or managed. And it allows me to do all that. And I work in the steward office, which is a small regional office we have, but yet we do a ton of business out of it. We have a bunch of good, successful guys that are, and more importantly, an excellent assistant to help us out with that. So it's just the destruction nature of it just allows me to navigate and do what I do. And Moynihan's a great guy to work for. I love him, and he just lets us make calls on the fly. Yeah. I've been there long enough. Obviously, you got to earn that privilege after a while and have a certain track record, but it just fits my personality.
Yeah, two things. I'm trying to envision somebody yelling at you. It just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. But the other,
my dad was a Marine.
You mentioned the importance of a good assistant, a good solid assistant.
Absolutely.
That right arm there that supports you all the way. Lon?
Well, fortunately, I was trained pretty well before I joined Fraser, so the big boss is here too. So Chuck. So
be careful now.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm self-trained, so the office though. Mike Basaka runs our office, and he's run a good ship. His deal is don't interfere and help me when ask for my help when you need it. Yeah. And I think everybody in our office has had enough tenure to know, if it smells bad, generally it is bad, and it's either something you have to walk away from or make the best of it. So the office itself functions. We're all working remote, so we're seeing a lot of stuff on the computers, but self-taught. I'm okay with how they're working their system. Yeah. I think everybody in our office is somewhat remote now.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Wes, how are you blending into the new corporate environment there?
So far, so good.
Yeah.
Yeah. As far as MarineMax's involvement, it's been seamless. Yeah. Still Northrop and Johnson. Fraser's still Fraser. Yeah. And I think it seems like it's going to stay that way, which is good. Yeah. Every company has its own kind of nuances and different bits of culture. For us, I think given brokers enough autonomy to make a deal has always been an important part of our company. But that's juxtaposed against having the structure of the office to make that happen, right? So I can make a call for insurance, crew placement, charter, and those answers come quickly, which is nice from a support. Yeah. If there's one third piece that I think's always been important for me in 16 years, 13 with Northrop and Johnson, is from the very beginning, way before I joined, we always had a no asshole rule.
Yeah.
And
say that again.
The importance of that is it makes the environment you go to, it makes you want to come to work. And that doesn't necessarily mean being in the office, but the people that you are interacting with, the people that are hired that you're going to be doing deals with in the office, and the people that are supporting you are people that you enjoy spending time with. You want them to be successful, just like hopefully they want you to be successful. I think that's an important part of an organization ethos.
You mentioned something about full service, and that's really important. That's a important point with me, and that if you're involved in any agencies that you're working for, any brokerage companies and all that, small, large, whatever, if you're not engaged in one way or the other in charter, and you're not engaged one way or the other in, to a certain extent, in management services, where you can send your customer so he stays with the company, doesn't find his way to another company that has that offers management, but there's a brokerage firm attached to it. So you need to have multi-service. You need to be have access to, for your brokers and their clients to have access to all those ancillary services that are provided. So it's a whole full customer package. I want to take a shift right now, and that's great. I wanted to let this go because everything was so forthcoming and so interesting. But I wanted to talk about ethics for just a second because we've been asked to. And ethics is one of those ethereal words that exists out there in space someplace. We're not really sure what it is, but we do refer to ethics in the IYBA bylaws, if you've never read them, if you want to read them, if you're really desperate. It's in there under Article 50 in the Code of Ethics. And there are morals, there are ethics, there's bad behavior, there's good behavior. We all know those that are out there in our industry who are successful, but yet have bad behavior or bad morals and all that. So I want to talk to you guys about these principles, between the difference between what's right and wrong. What guides, I want to ask each of you, what guides you to behave in an ethical manner, as opposed to what we might find elsewhere outside in the industry? Wes, can you answer? Is it, in other words, is this something that's been inbred in you by your mother and father, or is this something that's grown out of your relationship with your company and your own?
Oh, of course, I'm going to give credit to my mom and dad. But, the reality of it, I think what's going to keep people doing the right thing is kind of having your eye on the long term, right? Knowing that the right thing is not determined from deal to deal, but the fact that you're going to have to work and live with these people over a longer period of time, right? That's going to kind of define for you whether you're going to do something bad in this deal to hurt any one of you, or whether you're going to do the right thing. And that's a specific comment about how we interact together. But I think the same thing applies to our customers. You have to put yourself in their shoes and say, I'm not just trying to get this deal, I'm trying to put myself in a position where they come back to me for 2 or 3 deals. And I think that if your life and your work ethic is informed by long term, you end up just doing the right thing instinctually, because you know as soon as you don't, then it's going to turn that person or that group of people against you. So,
anybody out here dealt with unethical behavior in the brokerage marketplace? Yeah, you think so? Okay, yeah. Lon?
I went to church a lot when I was young,
yeah,
whether I wanted to or not, and went to a Catholic high school. So you learn a little bit about the doing the right thing, and it's just who I am. Period. So I think you have to go to the ethics, and then you have to go to trust. Yeah. When you realize that somebody's in their $1 million business or multi-million-dollar business, and they're calling you on their on their work phone during the middle of the day because their drawer has got the brochures that you sent to them, and that's what they want to talk about. You gotta project trust. Yeah. They want that trusted voice. So I think if you can relay the trust, it gets back to the ethics part of it. You're selling yourself as a honest, trustful person to do this transaction, because at the end of the day, what they're buying is a pleasure item. Yeah. It's a play toy, and it's a dream, it is a lifestyle if they choose for it to go that way. But it's a play toy, and I think there's room for the shady side of that in what we sell. So,
Michael?
I think these buyers also instinctively figure out if you're generally a good person. I mean, they're good at it. I mean, they've built their businesses on instinct. And, you know, I've always been a big believer in, you know, good things happen to good people. And if, like you said, over the long term, if that's the way you get up in the morning and live with yourself, it's just ingrained in you. That's just how you do business. You know, I think one of the most surprising things in my career, I mean, I've sold a couple hundred boats, is that, and my friends ask me this question often, is that, you know, how many of these people ultimately said, what the hell did I do?
Yeah.
Like, what mistake did I make? Yeah. And honestly, I think out of a couple hundred boats, maybe 2 people woke up a week later and said, that was dumb. Yeah. So I think somewhere along the line, I must have done something correct. I mean, or at least was honest with you know, I think one of the things as an industry we need to get away from is this, you know, how much does it cost to run a year? 10%. And I think that's just a lazy answer.
It is.
You know, if you buy a $20 million Westport and then 10 years later it's worth $10 million, is it half to operate it? No. And anybody with half a brain will look at you like, you know, how does that ratio, you know, you just got to come up with an at-the-dock operational cost, and it's research. You make 5 or 6, 7 phone calls, you put an Excel spreadsheet, hand it to the guy, and away you go. And I think if you stay along within those boundaries, you'll have happier clients and less, you know, blowback.
You know, the other whopper that's out there is, of course, that if you buy this boat, no matter what size it is, no matter what configuration it is and all that, that it's going to be a big hit in the charter business. You're going to make all kinds of money in the charter business, right? So it can be done in rare. I represented a boat that was doing 19 weeks of charter. I mean, with HMY, and that guy was turning over, and he was turning a positive profit, and he was moved up. So it can be done, but there are some big lies going on out there and all that. You know, I asked John Burkhart, who's the chairman of our very active Ethics and Arbitration Committee, IYBA, who handle a lot of ethics complaints during the year, and they're very interesting when they bring it to the board with their decision as what they've decided to do and with the complaint and all that. So I asked John if he would bring to me 3 examples, and I'm going to ask you guys to reflect on each of these, if I can find them. And John said, number 1, a listing broker has a fiduciary responsibility to a seller to present all offers. Sometimes the listing broker represents both the buyer and the seller in a dual agency transaction. Negotiations occur with the seller for a deal, and they reach a deal verbally. That's an in-house deal then, you understand? And an offer comes in from another broker. What should happen? In this case that John's describing to me, the actual case, they held off the second offer. They didn't present it. There was nothing in writing on the initial offer. It was verbal. What should have happened there, Wes?
Boy, that's a hard one to answer without knowing all of the background. I've done deals, depending on the circumstances and the strength of the offers, I've done deals where I've definitely submitted it, and then you have a discussion on which offer is stronger.
Well, this the second offer was never extended.
But was it in writing? Was it just a would you take?
According to this, yeah.
In other words, I would not, if I had a deal in front of me that was already verbally agreed, buyer and seller agreed to it verbally, and the brokers were all on the same page, then it would, for sure, if I got an offer in writing, I would definitely let the seller know. But if short of that, I don't know that I would go to great lengths to interfere with the deal where all the parties had already agreed.
Lana, have I given you enough information to respond to that?
Yeah, and I think the same thing I tell my kids, if it's been written, it's been said. Yeah. So when they're texting and all this other stuff. So a written deal should, you know, on its face value, be the one that's committed. However, if they've committed to a verbal deal and it's not backed up in writing via email, even though the formal contract hasn't been done, I think the first deal, if everybody's agreed, should take precedent. The other one would be in a backup mode, and I would let that person that he's in a backup mode.
Mike, would you agree?
I mean, Yacht Closer has helped stem a lot of those issues. Because you can physically watch when your offer's made, has it been opened, has it been forwarded, and I think it takes a lot of the behind-the-scenes sandbagging that used to go on for years in our industry. That's cleaned that up a lot. But yeah, I mean, I would submit any and all offers, and listen, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what we think. It's the boat owner
Yeah. It comes back to ethics too, you know. If you've got a second offer, regardless of the fact that hey, look, you got a deal going with your owner and it's not in writing, nothing at all, you just have a verbal agreement, and then all of a sudden another one comes in writing, you know. You hold it off, you don't even present it to them, then you could be in trouble. The second, this second one is one that has been mentioned a lot to us, and I call it a ghost listing, but it's, what's the common term for holding a boat off the market? Okay.
Off market.
Off market. So you get the listing, all right, but you hold it off market until you have presented it to your clients and to your company and all that. What's your attitude about that, Wes?
I think we do that generally.
Yeah.
Not for a long period of time, but we definitely, and I mean, it's fair to know for anybody that's in smaller brokerages or competing brokerages, if you have a listing, and it's not, this is part of being in an organization, right, and supporting the people you work with. You generally give your brokers first shot, because in some cases there might be 10 people that have the same guy's email address. So if it's coming from your email or one of your colleagues sitting in the office next door, we generally give a head start.
Yeah.
Agree?
Right? I think any organization does that.
Same thing, but I think if you have permission from the seller, seller drives the deal, no matter what, that, hey, we're going to try to sell this around the house first and give us 2 weeks or whatever it is, you get his approval.
Yeah.
I mean, so you got a signed listing, but you know weeks and weeks prior to it that it was coming down the pipe.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, like I know it's coming in the fall.
Yeah.
You know, so you could kind of pre-work it behind. It happens everywhere.
Yeah, Paul.
But at some point, the customer's going to want to bring the full market to bear. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, you got to do it a little bit in-house and then open it up.
Flannery and I were talking about this. We talked about what does this say? Where's Paul? What does it say in the listing agreement, Paul? What does it say? We were surprised to find that what are the responsibilities of a broker when he gets the listing agreement?
I wasn't surprised. I just acted that way so you wouldn't think I knew everything. But
you were on forms.
So interestingly, we looked at, I still have the file from 2011 when we wrote these forms, and I looked at some of the old listings. And actually, there was an HMY listing that we found in there that the language specifically stated that it is incumbent upon the broker to use all forms at his disposal
to
promote that product. It does not say when. Yeah. You're right. But it says that you will use all methods at your disposal to promote that product to the industry, including MLS systems, advertising, and so on and so forth. Interestingly, in our current listing agreement, it doesn't give you any specific direction as to what you must do. Yeah. What it does is basically the owner of the vessel authorizes you to use your best discretion. Mm-hmm. So I think the genesis of why we changed that language to be the way it is now was because it would be very easy for Wes to take a listing and put it in 6 different multiple listing systems and put it in 4 magazines, but the guy's got unrealistic expectations, and Wes decided for whatever reason to take the listing anyway. A year goes by, and the guy could go after him saying, you know what, you didn't use 7 different magazines and 22 different listing systems, so he could hold him accountable or be liable. So what we did is we created the language that gives the broker his professional license or his professional opinion as to the best ways to promote that boat.
Thanks. Paul, do we have a couple of minutes for questions?
We have a very short couple of minutes, yes.
Anybody? You're seated at the foot of the Oracle of Delphi here.
There should be music.
And, rub the crystal ball.
I just wanted to make a comment that I read a while ago an article about ethics in Bill Moyer's book. And he said, usually if people have a choice between doing what's right or wrong, they'll choose right. The problem is when it's gray. The problem is when there's no exact answer. And you can see even just by your questions now what a conflict that is for people. Yeah. And it's different with everyone in that way. And that's why sometimes you need a board or someone else with authority to define what it is. Mm-hmm. So that's part of it, is coming over time to definitions of what we think is ethical or not ethical. Yeah.
The other, I'm not going to go into it, but there was other example that was given here, and it's a pretty common, and that is that as it becomes known that a listing is expiring, to be approached by other brokers and say, hey, I know it's coming up for renewal, and I'd like to have a shot at it. Or worse, saying, hey, you know, I didn't know your boat was for sale. I never see anything about it in any of the MLSs or anything. Is it really for sale? I'd sure like to represent it, you know, so you discredit the existing client. You were about to...
Well, I was just going to answer
That was great, Annie.
point, because there is a lot of gray, right? Gray with clients, there's gray amongst each other. I think if you go back to the old school, use Lon's Sunday school history as just to kind of define this, just ask yourself, if you're doing something that you're like questioning whether it may hurt or harm, would you want that same person to do it back to you, right? If you're comfortable with that, then you're probably on the right track. But if you feel like if the roles were reversed, you would be upset, then maybe just take a second to think about it and do the right thing.
I think that's a great way to finish this conversation. Yeah.
One question over here.
Okay.
I was just going to add, and you stole a little thunder, that's a great answer, what you just said, and to what Lon said a minute ago, ask the client, it's up to the client ultimately, about protecting a listing or whatever you want to call it. The bottom line, it takes a lot of gray out for us when we're having this discussions amongst ourselves, is it takes it totally out, actually, if you just step back 1 second and you say, what's in my client's best interest? Is it in his best interest for me to delay putting this out there for 2 weeks, or is it not?
Yeah.
So that's the way we try and look at it.
Good rule. Good rule. Gary.
Gary, in that regard, just to clarify kind of how we do it, we go through a process by which we get the listing prepared for public consumption. That includes having proper photography, proper specs, et cetera. So when I'm talking about a head start, that is typically just the fact that we have the listing signed, right? So once it's ready to go, obviously it's in the client's best interest to make that public, work with whoever has a buyer and sell the boat. But usually there's a week or two in advance of that where the listing is signed and you're prepping. Typically what we'll do is just get everybody internally organized as kind of a soft opening, more or less, and then it's ready for public consumption. So it's not quite as stark as maybe I mentioned earlier.
My last question was going to be, but I don't have time, obviously, but was going to be, what would you do if your son, Ryan, or Carter, or he came to you at 21 years old and said, I want to be a yacht broker, Dad. What advice can you give me? But we won't go into that. We'll save that for the next time. Wes, Lon, Mike, I couldn't think of a group of better guys to have up here to share your knowledge and experience with us, and I want to thank you so much for all that you've said
Thanks,
today.
Bob.
Thanks for having me.
Bye.
Thanks.
Thanks, guys.
Good man. Thanks.
Okay. Don't yell at me, Paul.
You're good. Merrigan's in the room to keep an eye on you.